Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to you from wherever you are joining us. This is the first Capital Bank webinar, the latest in a series of webinars that we've been bringing you as First Capital Bank. I want to thank you all who are joining us from different parts of the world. This is being streamed live on LinkedIn as well as various other social and digital platforms. So we encourage you, if you know anyone who's out there who'd be interested, and I'm sure there are very many people who would be interested in a discussion of this nature, please ask them to log on to the First Capital Bank pages on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube. And they can catch a glimpse of what's happening right here. It's going to be a very insightful, I think, and very relevant topical discussion that we are having here. The focus of today's webinar is on challenges, opportunities, and trade optimization for industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. Now, just to give you a bit of a background, as I said, this is the latest in a series of webinars that have been brought to you by First Capital Bank. We've had some initial ones that were focusing on the agricultural sector, agro-processing, and the different value chains in that sector. And I think it is only logical now that given the relationship that exists between agriculture and manufacturing, they feed into each other. It is now a progression into the manufacturing and industrial side of things to see how best opportunities can be optimized. The purpose of today's webinar is to highlight the key potential and opportunities in industry and commerce and in the value chains. It's also to identify common challenges that are faced by stakeholders and players and to come up with effective industry commercial value chains and ways around some of those challenges. It's to draw insights and best practices from industry experts and also to get a clear direction on how to navigate these challenges and how best to leverage on the opportunities. Now, the last two bits that I've spoken about are crucial because this is where you as viewers who are tuning in and joining us and are not part of the panel come in, because we acknowledge that there are people out there with lots of information, lots of experiences, and lots of insights. And we want to share those insights and those experiences. We want to hear from you. So we want to make this engagement as interactive as possible. So please do feel free to ask questions, to make comments and contributions. We want to hear from you and we want you to participate and be part of this discussion. We have a very high-powered and high-level delegation that will be part of the panel and speaking to these issues, looking at the issues of challenges, opportunities for trade optimization in Zimbabwe. A very accomplished panel, but as I said, to make this discussion most valuable, would love to hear from you as participants and viewers who are joining us from all over the world to share your experiences. And to do that, just post your comment or question in the comments section on LinkedIn and on any other platform where you are viewing this. So if you'd like to make a question or contribution, please do so. Just post that question, tell us who you are, and post your comment, your question or contribution via the comments section, and we'll be sure to take those comments and contributions and read them and put them to the different participants. So if you'd like to direct it to our particular panelist, you can also indicate that this one is directed at X or directed at Y, and we'll be here to hold them and make sure that they do address those questions and comments. So the discussion will be kicking off very, very shortly. I just wanted to make those few housekeeping announcements to those who are joining us via our digital platforms. Please post your comments, your questions, and your contributions in the comments section. It is as interactive as possible. We want to make it as interactive as possible. Don't wait until the end. If you have a question or comment, post it immediately, and we'll get the earliest opportunity to put it to the person that you would like to answer that question. So once again, today we are looking at the challenges, opportunities, and trade optimization for industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. We're going to have a public sector point of view. We're going to have a private sector point of view, speaking to a big business, but we're also going to speak to SMEs because I think they're crucial and, the engines and driving force of the economy. So we've got an SME view, we've got a big business point of view. We also have a policy point of view because we have the Honorable Minister who will be speaking to those issues. And then putting it all together, together, because at the end of the day, to facilitate all these activities, to facilitate business is required funding and that sort of support. So we'll also have at the highest level from First Capital Bank interventions and speaking to how the bank is getting involved, what facilities are in place, how you can be assisted by the bank, and what the bank is doing to try and ensure that this side of the business does grow. The payoff or the tagline for First Capital is belief comes first. And they're saying, let's believe that this big bank will play a crucial role in driving the economy and improving the economy. And that is the purpose of these webinars that we've been hosting over the last few months, is to try and identify opportunities that can be leveraged, that can be exploited, and how First Capital Bank can assist in doing that. We're also looking at challenges, although not focusing much on that. But yes, we acknowledge that there are hurdles, trying to find how we can clear those hurdles, how we can get around them, and how First Capital Bank can enable you and assist you to do that. So that is the thinking behind this series of webinars, and we look forward to doing a whole lot more going forward. And we want to thank you once again for joining us and for being a part of this. Thank you for tuning in. And if you have anyone who you believe will get value from this, or who you believe can contribute to this discussion where we are focusing on industry, on commerce, and on trade, please ask them to follow the First Capital Bank social media handles. This is coming to you on LinkedIn, it is on Facebook, it is on YouTube. Also go to Twitter and you'll be directed to the appropriate pages. Just to highlight who our panel is today, and I'll be introducing them in much greater detail when it is their opportunity to speak, but just to let you know that our keynote speaker and guest of honor for this webinar will be none other than the Honorable Minister of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Sekai Nzenza. We also have the Managing Director of First Capital Bank, Mr. Kieran McSherry. We have a industrialist, chairperson of various bodies and organizations, a past president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Mr. Busisa Moyo. He'll also be weighing in and contributing. We have Ms. Kudzai Dave. She is the owner and proprietor of a company called K. Davies Packaging. She built up this business from a one-man band into a very formidable player in the paper packaging industry. So we'll be hearing from her, and she'll be sharing her insights. We have Watson Amunakwadi. He is the group head of investments for Masawara Group, and he'll also be sharing, some very regional and international expertise and insights that he has gained in his working experience. So it is a very accomplished, a very, appropriately constituted panel that we have here, and we look forward to a very engaging and insightful discussion that will be coming your way very, very shortly. As I said, do participate. It is not one-way communication. We'd love to hear from you. We want to make this interactive. So please post your comments or questions if you'd like to, areas that you think have not been addressed, areas that you'd want to see addressed. Please post those in our comment section, and we'll have them addressed very, promptly by the appropriate person to whom you have directed that question. So it is interactive, and would love to hear from you. And we'll be kicking off very, very shortly and getting this discussion underway very, very shortly. And I want to thank you once again for being here, being a part of this discussion. We look forward to you getting loads of value from what will be taking place right here. Once again, the panel, I can see them all ready to go, and we'll be kicking off very, very shortly. Again, this discussion, I think, very relevant and germane right now, given what we've seen happen over the last couple of years, COVID-19 and the supply chain disruptions that has caused, I think, has created some sort of discussion around what Africa can do. I do note that yesterday on social media, one of our panelists, Mr. Busisa Moyo, took to social media on Twitter. I think I saw him commenting around issues that are happening now in Russia and Ukraine, and how that should cause an interrogation of what Africa can do for ourselves, to start manufacturing for ourselves, to be self-sufficient on our own. So clearly, these are the issues we want to talk to. We know that the Africa Consolidated Free Trade Area has come into being, and again, a very relevant time to be talking about that, because we are told that it is a bonanza of opportunities for African economies and for African business people. But we also know that it will come with loads more competition as people try to break into this market and as we try to compete for those export markets. So all that will be under discussion today, trying to see how best we can optimize those opportunities, what interventions can be put in place, and crucially, how First Capital Bank can assist in terms of making those aspirations a reality. We'll be kicking off shortly. I think if I could just perhaps at this point, as by way of introduction, Kieran, if you could just perhaps very, very briefly, before we get into the real meat of the matter, just welcome everyone who is here, particularly those who are joining us online, and just once again committing to why First Capital Bank is doing this before we get the ball rolling and getting into the actual discussion.
Thank you, Farai. Thank you for that. Yes, good morning and welcome all to this webinar. I think, as Farai said, to us it's important that we work together and communicate. I think this is a great way of sharing our thoughts, our challenges, and together hopefully coming up with some solutions and helping us all work a better way forward. As I say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So I think that's a lot of the rationale behind why we are doing this. Collaboration is also one of our values, and we very much believe as a bank in building long-term partnerships and relationships with our customers. So thank you to our guests for making the effort to be here, because I know everyone is incredibly busy. But principally, thank you to our guest speaker, the Honourable Minister for Industry and Commerce, Dr. Sakai Nzenza. Basisa Moyo, Chief Executive Officer of United Refineries, Kudzai Dave, KV Davy Packaging Limited, Watson Hamana Kwanzi, apologies if I've butchered your name, Group Head of Investments, Masawara Group, and all our online viewers. It's an absolute pleasure to host this. And as I said, this is about us trying to tease out the problems along this subject of the challenges, the opportunities, and trade optimization for industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. So we hope everybody will find these conversations value-adding and will walk away from this meeting with a much greater knowledge than perhaps and ideas than perhaps where we are as we work forward. So thank you. Over to you, Farai.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kieran, for that and for those welcome remarks. Yeah, we certainly look forward, as you said, to people walking away from this with value and seeing that there are opportunities that have been availed. We know, I mean, beyond what we're doing here, that First Capital Bank is very active. In the last couple of weeks, we've seen them, receiving funding, and that will go towards, I'm sure, some of the issues that we'll speak to here, and to customers and clients and business people who would like to, who need some financial support, who need funding to expand operations, to retool. I think given the sort of playing field that we want to go into, the competition that will come as we try to get into these export markets, there's a requirement for modern plant and machinery, for automation, to engage and be equipped for the fourth industrial revolution. So clearly all these are things that need funding, and First Capital Bank is saying we are here to support, to facilitate, and to assist. We certainly hope that you take the opportunity to approach them and find out how you can benefit from what's happening at the bank. As I said, developments of funds coming through, as well as other funds, obviously, that they have in place ready to assist and facilitate you. Once again, our panel, Watson Amunakwadi is the Group Head of Investments from Masawara Group, where we have Mr. Basisa Moyo. I suppose at this point in time, let me take this opportunity to briefly give you some background to some of the people who are, on the panel, so you know who they are, the experiences, and what they have been through. Mr. Kudzai, Ms. Kudzai Dave is an entrepreneur, as I said. She is the owner of K. Davey Packaging. It's an expert in the corrugated packaging industry with skills and experience spanning more than 14 years. As I said, she started this business on her own. She's grown it now. She's employing over 30 people and looking to grow even further. She's a recipient, previous recipient of the ZNCC Businesswoman of the Year Award for Mashonaland region. That was in 2021. In 2015, she was awarded the Businesswoman of the Year, as well as the top female business leader of the year in the packaging industry. And that was in the Women's Leadership Awards. Watson Amunakwadi, as you've already heard, Head of Investments and Capital Management for Masawara Group. He works directly with investee companies on strategy formulation and implementation. He's an investment banker by profession and has extensive experience in deal making, corporate finance, structured trade and commodity finance, and infrastructure and resources credit. So clearly the sort of person that would love to hear from. Prior to joining Masawara, he spent 7 years at Rand Merchant Bank, and that was doing work ranging from corporate finance transactions, cross-border and international mergers, acquisitions, listings, delistings, capital raising, corporate restructures, and empowerment acquisitions. Usisa Moyo, I dare say a man who doesn't need any introduction because of the many hats that he wears, but he is here as an industrialist, wearing his hat amongst others, chairman of the Oil Expressors Association of Zimbabwe. He's, as I said, former president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industry. He chairs the Zimbabwe Investment Development Agency, as well as the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair. Kieran McSherry, who you've heard from, is the managing director of First Capital Bank. He's been the managing director since June 2020, so approaching an anniversary there. He joined the bank in 2018 as chief finance officer. Prior to that, he worked for Barclays in the United Kingdom, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Lloyd's Banking Group. He has over 20 years of experience in banking, and I'm sure he's adding a lot of value to the landscape here in Zimbabwe in terms of bringing banking expertise, particularly in areas of trade and that international experience. So that is our panel. And of course, our guest of honor and keynote speaker is none other than the Honorable Minister of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Sekai Nzenza, who will be joining us very, very shortly. And then we'll be able to get the ball rolling. Again, if you'd like to participate, if you'd like to contribute, please feel free to do so. We will read and take on board as many contributions from you as we can. Please tell us who you are, what your question and contribution is, and we will direct those questions to the appropriate person to whom they have been directed. So thank you once again. This is the first Capital Bank webinar. We thank you for joining us from wherever you are. And we are looking, of course, at challenges, opportunities, and the trade optimization for industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. It is a warm welcome for you, to you, and we will be kicking off this discussion very, very shortly once our guest of honor has come online and will be able to give us an overview. I'm told that while we wait for the minister, we can get the ball rolling by asking the man who I said wears many hats, perhaps now, to get the ball rolling, because he has been in the trenches. Usisa Moyo has been, agitating, lobbying, doing all sorts of things for industry for many, many years now, previously as CZI and now in different spheres where he sits. So I would like to hand over to him perhaps to begin by setting the scene in terms of where we are in terms of industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. What is the situation currently? And perhaps also highlighting what he sees as the challenges and the opportunities, and whether we are poised and prepared to capitalize on them. Usisa, it is over to you, sir.
Farai, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Kieran, thank you very much. They didn't mention that I see the minister is on. Farai, shall I make way for the minister? I was just place holding, or shall I go ahead and start? I just want to give you this opportunity. I can charge ahead if you like, but I want to recognize Tsikwane province.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Usisa. we want to acknowledge the Honourable Minister indeed. Thank you, Honourable Minister, for coming through. A warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for making time and for joining us.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies for being late. And I just want to thank Busisa for having the floor right now. So please, Busisa, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Farai. I do have a short presentation. I want to say thank you to Kieran McSherry, who's a former colleague. They didn't mention that I used to be on the board of First Capital Bank before I started wearing too many caps, hats, and other things. So thank you very much, Kieran, for having me back. I feel like I'm back at the bank this morning.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Kieran. I recognize the Honourable Minister and fellow panelists that are here. I do have a short presentation that I want to share. Thank you very much for allowing me to share it. I can see I can. And then I'm going to just run through what I have here. I hope it will work out. You can see my presentation? Yes?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay,
yes,
so yes, so we say that, you know, I think the comment has been made that we are living in an environment of banning. Banning means our situation is very brittle. Things sort of fall apart very quickly. Everyone is very anxious. So many changes after COVID. Now there's wars in Europe. So very anxious environment. Everybody's a bit uneasy. Nobody's resting easy. So a very anxious time. And I think as leaders, we have a responsibility to calm everybody and make sure that we are giving the demeanor of cooperation and not creating more anxiety. Non-linear, difficult to understand the relationships now. It used to be easy. You just used to look for cause and effect, but now things are not easy to you know, to follow. X doesn't always nudge Y in the same direction and in the same magnitude. And then incomprehensible, some things happening in our world that really difficult to understand. So that's the backdrop that we are talking in. And coming to industry, I just wanted to highlight that, you know, capacity utilization in industry has been, you know, this is according to CZI. You know, I rely a lot on the information that CZI generates, and over the years, you know, I've had the opportunity to participate in the development of this survey. And I think this year, thanks to the leadership of our president, Mr. Kurai Macheza, and our CEO, Sekai Kuwarika, they've really done a good job of making sure that, you know, they include more companies and they don't just look at big business, but also look at smaller businesses. So what I want to highlight here is, you know, capacity utilization in 2021 was the highest in the 10-year period. So this is quite a significant achievement that we need to take note of. And I think it was a coach, a Manchester United coach, that says never change a winning team. So that was Sir Donald Ramsey. So I wanted to highlight that and say, look, we've been going in the right direction, certainly from a manufacturing point of view and growing. So we need to be careful that in what we do, we don't undo what has been achieved thus far. But there are certain things, opportunity that this means. Number one, it means more raw materials are required. So some of our what we call problems is because we are growing. You know, if you are expanding capacity utilization, it means you're going to need more currency. You're going to need more, whether it's cotton seed, your raw material supply, whether it's seed inputs, fertilizer, whatever sector you're in, whether it's raw milk. It means if you're expanding or growing, or capacity utilization is growing, you're going to need more raw materials. And with more raw materials comes more packaging, more staff, job creation, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I just want to highlight that, you know, according to the auction statistics, plus 70% of imports outside of fuel, if we leave out fuel, and we look at, sort of raw material imports, 70%, and arguably fuel is also going in a large part, in particular diesel. A large chunk of our imports are actually raw materials and machinery. That's what we've been importing, and I think that we're going to be looking, and there's a big opportunity here for finance houses like First Capital Bank to have funding or financing, and I know some of the banks are starting to lend in United States dollars for both raw materials and machinery. So there's an opportunity there. I also see opportunity. All this puts pressure on value chains. So in the businesses where we are sitting, whether it's timber, it means that you need more furniture, so you need more timber. So that puts pressure on the backward value chain. So there's a need to expand these value chains backwards. So besides just financing a United Refineries, now we are talking about financing farmers, and that creates more opportunities for financial services type people, not just the banks, but also perhaps those that, asset managers and the like, to look at, how do we participate in value chain development. A lot of the times when these value chains are spoken about, it's more like a government program, but it isn't. It's a commercial lattice work and a way of organizing raw material supply chains into finished products. And a lot of financiers have challenges in financing farmers, for example, where there isn't an off-taker. So by looking more carefully at, who's in the value chain, that value chain also needs, 4IR. Some of the technologies that we're using are 60 years old. We need, driverless tractors. We need driverless planters and things like that. So opportunities to actually enhance technology with a view to growing yields, growing outputs, output per hectare, output per unit of inputs. So big opportunities there that we see, and I'll summarize that a little later. I then go on to just talk about, the fact that, there's expansion, but there's also re-equipping, and this is out of our study. You can see there, my sister, you introduced Mrs. Sikaoke there, and you can see, that her sector, for example, 50.6% of companies in the paper printing and publishing sector, 50% added capacity. This is not just sort of polishing up what you have or replacing spare parts or whatever. This is sorry, it's Kudzai. Sorry, I mixed the two up there. So Kudzai, you can see a sector there, adding capacity, but I can tell you that also in terms of replacement of existing machinery, the statistics are no different. We're seeing companies investing in that. What is lacking, I think, is financing that is friendly to machinery type. So your lease finance, your asset finance that looks at leasing, whether it's motor vehicles, machinery, processing equipment, and the like. So a big opportunity there, as you can see that, a lot of the sectors, the majority of sectors there recorded some additional capacity. And also, again, pointing to the fact that, from a manufacturing point of view, the view is actually positive. It's directionally positive because I can tell you in previous years, I don't have the comparator here, but in previous years, we were not seeing additional capacity. We were seeing more replacement type investment. But here we're seeing expansionary type to expand operations. Then this is sort of my last slide, and then I'm going to summarize that, I get a lot of questions. Okay, Moyo, you talk about, substitution, value chains, and so on, but what's in it for us? Well, if we do this correctly, we do see job creation. Where's the evidence? Well, 53%. This is higher than the amount of machines that the publishing sector or the packaging sector introduced. So in other words, more jobs were created than machines were added for expansion. So the real positive impact of growing manufacturing is that it has a high multiplier effect. One job in manufacturing stands for 6 to 7 jobs elsewhere. So a multiplier. In other sectors, no criticism, like mining, you find that the mine employs the mine workers, and then they have a product and they export it. Yes, there is some value chain impact, like in transport and things like that. But manufacturing, because once we start to expand, we look at agriculture, soybean production, cotton production, if we want to grow our textiles. So the multiplier effect of that is always much more significant in terms of job creation. And this is why it's important to preserve manufacturing sector. I know, folk would want to say, no, you're just like any other sector. Well, not really, because if you want to build resilience, you need a vibrant manufacturing sector. I can tell you that UNIDO have always said no country can come out of poverty without a manufacturing sector. There's no evidence of this empirically, that any country has ever emerged out of poverty without industrialization. The few that have are exceptions rather than the rule. So, I'm from manufacturing, and I'll always talk positively about manufacturing, but this, you can check it out for yourself on the UNIDO website. But you can see there is a bit of churn. So we do have some retrenchments. As you can see, 16% of the manufacturing firms in the manufacturing sector did retrench. But if you look at the jobs that were created, you can see that there are more jobs that were created. First of all, 53% created new jobs. Of those, the average number of jobs created was like close to 20%, 19%. But only 16%, retrenched. And of those 16%, the average retrenchment rate was 16% of the total jobs. So you can see, if you do the math, you can see that you are actually having, in spite of a churn rate, additions and losses, you are actually growing because you are creating more jobs than you are losing. So there's a net gain there from the manufacturing sector. I close with this slide, just summarizing the opportunities that I see and highlighting the challenges. Again, I see expansion, retooling. I am talking to bank clients, investors, and the bank itself to say that there's big opportunities there that we see, and perhaps not looking to land and buildings as security, but to the actual machines themselves. We've seen this with combine harvesters, where we are doing up growers for farms, contract growers, and we've been saying to the banks that, look, if we want to get a combine harvester that's shared among farmers, that combine harvester can serve as security. Yeah, the bank can say, look, we want 30% of the value down, and we can look at that, but really we look to the move of security. So I think there needs to be a bit of creativity there in terms of how we the expansion of the manufacturing sector. Localization of raw materials. The CZI CEO calls this manufacturing for manufacturing, or production for manufacturing, so that we don't just localize the end product like cooking oil, but we also localize the inputs that go into cooking oil. Then we are creating a network of expansion and growing other sectors. We don't just localize clothing and say no import of mabero or secondhand clothing. We say, look, the cotton farmer, also we need expansion in the cotton, and we need to value add our cotton, because at the moment, only 5% of our cotton is value added in the country. 95% is exported. And this is a tragedy of Africa. We're still a primary producer, which really, really is a very painful, and we need to change. I pray it will be in our generation that we change this proverb of exporting raw materials, whether it's lithium. We should be talking to Elon Musk and saying, look, we want to value add some of that lithium so that it goes into your electric cars, as opposed to just sending raw materials. But this is the challenge that we have. While we export 95% of raw cotton, we are a net importer of clothing. It's exactly the same in leather. We export raw leather, we import shoes. 75% of school shoes that are worn in this country, it's 2 million students, 75% of those are imported. They're not produced locally. So this is some of the challenge, big opportunities for financiers that will look below the surface and see what's actually happening. I think the AFCFTA, big opportunity, and we can have shared regional value chains. One country produces, the other adds value, another buys a product. And I think we should be creating these alliances, whether it's with Malawi, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and we've seen this in practice. And just building a regional resilience. So I think the AFCFTA is a big opportunity. Trade finance, big opportunity. Some of the challenges we have as Zimbabwe, balancing trade openness and internal development. So right now, do we open for imports? I know that the import on the open general license, import license is temporary. Countries are grappling with this. Do we balance? How do we balance trade openness and internal development? Because sometimes, in order to develop, you have to close off a little bit, and sometimes you can open prematurely or just before you have, you spark off a sort of a production revolution. You throw the baby with the bathwater and you go back, but you will always come back to this point where you have to develop a manufacturing sector. Cost of doing business, a big challenge. Interest rates, I think we need to look at that. I mean, fertilizers, inputs into value chain. So people say, well, why does cooking oil cost so much? Well, it will cost a lot if the inputs along the value chain are also expensive, and farmers are trying to replace for the next season, and they're seeing the high costs that they're going to be faced with, and so they're ratcheting their costs. Macroeconomic consistency, I think there's a lot of uncertainty there that we have to tackle. Fortunately, our authorities are alive to this. There's a lot of energy that's being invested in bringing down inflation, which is quite high at the moment. I mean, if you compare with Zambia, that just came out with the statistics of 10.2% per annum. This is where we're still quite far, and I'm sure Watson will more eloquently tell us about what are others doing, because we are not the only player in the region. Exchange rate, the whole exchange rates creates challenges. Colleagues, thank you very much. Those are my views sitting in industry, in business. I've just summarized, not an exhaustive list. Siyabonga, Tatenda, thank you. Asante without the sana. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Karibu, to you, Busisa. Thank you so much for that overview. I think sort of giving us a clear picture of where we are and what the key issues are. Very quickly, before we bring in the Honorable Minister to now speak to us, I did encourage people to get in touch and ask questions if they have any. Trinos Musole, thank you so much getting in touch with us via LinkedIn. He's asking a question here and saying, would we know what is our steady state industry capacity utilization in the medium term? And I think he's speaking to the fact that, that graph you showed us, Busisa, was quite jagged in terms of where up and down, it's oscillating. So going forward in the medium term, what do you see as our sort of steady state capacity utilization?
So thanks, Farai, for that question. So last year, I think we had set ourselves a target of 61%, working with our line ministry, Ministry of Industry. That was our target, and I think this year we want to achieve 65%. So really, most businesses, or the production manufacturing type revolutions, really starts off at about 68%. That's when you start to see, companies making profits, companies in manufacturing starting to invest in other companies. So really, we should be targeting above 70% if we want to be, steady and stable and strong.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And at this point, allow me now to bring in the line minister who you alluded to and made mention of. Clearly, there's a lot of collaboration and working together there as you set some of these targets. Our guest of honor and keynote speaker today, the Honorable Minister of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Sekai Nzenza. Thank you so much once again for joining us. I think you've had an opportunity to see the picture that has been painted by Mr. Busisa Moyo, and I'd now like to hand over to you to give us your remarks and speech for this webinar. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies, captains of industry, the media present, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to begin by commenting First Capital Bank Limited for creating this platform to discuss opportunities and challenges for industry and commerce in Zimbabwe. It is such an honor, so I want to thank you for this opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, platforms such as this one for both government and the private sector give us an opportunity to introspect on our policies, on our strategies, and also at the same time identify what's working well and what is not working well. And I'm pleased also to realize that despite COVID, we are very much on track to build a resilient and sustainable manufacturing sector. I was listening to Busisa talking earlier, and we are both pleased with the results that we got from the CZI manufacturing survey. And I want to get back to that in a little while. But firstly, ladies and gentlemen, my key word or my key takeaway from what I'm going to present today is the word value addition. I'm mentioning this in view of where we are at as a country. What we can see from what Busisa presented earlier is that slide that he showed, that 70% of imports were to do with raw materials and machinery. And in view of that figure, what concerns me as Minister of Industry and Commerce is what we import, which we can produce locally. And when we look at that, we have to look at the past as to what actually happened. Why is it that we got to this point whereby, as you mentioned earlier, Mabero, Karen, I see Karen, you're there. I don't know whether you know what Mabero is. Mabero are those secondhand clothes.
Thank you.
And those secondhand clothes, when you look at them, and I do frequent to look at those bales to see where they're coming from. They're coming from Australia, mostly. They're coming from the US, mostly. And quite a lot are also coming from China. And yes, these Mabero are accessible, they are cheaper. But what has that done to our clothing industry? We are having to re-examine our cotton to clothing strategy. And that requires a whole of government approach whereby my ministry and the Ministry of Agriculture need to come together to say how best can we focus on reversing this trajectory. Whereas Busisa said earlier, imagine 95% of the cotton that we're producing is being exported. Some of our best lint is also being exported. What does that mean in terms of value addition and beneficiation? So that is quite seriously a pain point. I'm just mentioning cotton. Look at steel, again as an example. We're spending close to $1 billion in steel imports, possibly more. Leather shoes, Busisa mentioned earlier, And I'm just talking about some of the challenges we're having at the moment. Butter, for example, is struggling to get the raw heights. And yet the potential that we have with our agricultural recovery plan is to grow our livestock. So yes, I want to admit that we are importing a lot, but I'm pleased to say we are now at the right time, because we've got the National Development Strategy 1, where we are looking at the productive sector in Zimbabwe, which is now undergoing structural transformation. We're increasing investments, we are retooling, we are engaged in refurbishments, which will ultimately see the regeneration of the Zimbabwean economy. As synonymous to this regeneration of the productive sector, we have witnessed an increased investment by multinational companies in Zimbabwe. We are targeting the private sector-led growth. I also just want to mention that the CZI 2021 Annual Manufacturing Survey showed that large-scale capacity utilization went up by 62.7%, and SMEs were 54%. Now, that is remarkable. And I would like us to go as much as 70%. It's a target. And one has to dream and also to make it happen. The growth that is witnessed is born out of the president's vision, which the government has undertaken. And some of the 4 key points that we just need to bear in mind as part of the president's vision is: number 1, we need to look at a dual strategic thrust towards a private sector-led economic growth and export-led growth. And secondly, related to this, we're also looking at the creation of a favorable operating environment where the ease of doing business is a reality. At this point, I also want to acknowledge that, yes, there are challenges. And these challenges require us to work together to work on those bottlenecks that exist. But let me go to my third point. Thirdly, we're looking at international re-engagement on all fronts, which require prioritizing economic diplomacy as we boost not only intra-African trade, but also looking at penetration of the global value and all the supply chains. Now, fourthly, we are looking at increased productivity and production as Zimbabwe prioritizes value addition and beneficiation under the Zimbabwe Industrial Development Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, and also the captains of industry who are here, we need to unlock the potential in the various economic sectors. And my ministry has undertaken sector-specific strategies in order for us to implement the value chains. Let me just go through some of the key areas where we've developed strategies, and we've also had very strong input from the private sector. We are looking at agro-processing, and Busisa mentioned soybeans earlier. And looking at agro-processing, again, is working closely with the Ministry of Agriculture, where we are encouraging companies such as Busisa's company, other cotton oil processing companies to engage outgrowers so that we've got increased production of soybeans. We're also looking at pharmaceuticals. At the moment, we currently have only 12% of pharmaceuticals are produced in Zimbabwe. 88% is imported. But I'm excited to say we do have a pharmaceutical strategy, and already there are conversations, there are MOUs being signed by at least 2 or 3 external pharmaceutical companies. We're also looking at the bus and truck assembly. We have the strategy already at Industrial Development Corporation. We have started manufacturing buses. Already we've manufactured 20 buses. Looking at iron and steel, as part of reversing that import trajectory, Zisco Steel is already engaged in a strategy where they've got an investor in, and I'm foreseeing a change in the next 12 months to 18 months, where we should be able to produce steel for downstream and upstream industries. We also have the leather value chain, which I mentioned earlier, the cotton to clothing, and tobacco. Now I gather about 95 to 99% of the tobacco grown in this country is being exported, raw as it is. So if we're going to grow tobacco, we also need to look at the value addition. And there are some companies already engaged in that process of manufacturing tobacco inside Zimbabwe. Now, when we come to mineral beneficiation, yes, I totally agree. Lithium batteries, electric vehicles. Now, this is an exciting opportunity for Zimbabwe because we do have the raw materials. And once again, we are strongly looking at private sector investment in this area so that we have beneficiation within Zimbabwe. One last point is the fertilizer. Given the war that has happened in the Ukraine, and as we know, Zimbabwe has already been importing fertilizer from Russia, from Ukraine. But this is an opportunity for us. We do have the phosphate at Dorowa Minerals, for example. We now need to start looking inside and utilize the minerals that we have so that value addition and beneficiation and creation of employment does happen in Zimbabwe. As I said earlier, the key word I bring today to this particular platform is value addition. There's also been a massive potential for lucrative partnerships as we invest in innovation and technology in pursuit of the 4th industrial revolution. And ladies and gentlemen, in year 2021 alone, we witnessed an investment of up to 145 million by local firms in technology. Busisa mentioned earlier the AFCTA, and I just want to add to what he said that we need to look more closely at intra-African trade and focus on shared value chains. Ladies and gentlemen, as I close, I want to challenge the members of the private sector here present to leverage against the positive gains that have already been made in the Second Republic. And the challenges do exist, and I am aware of them. And Busisa mentioned some of them earlier when he talked about the cost of production, fuel, issues of logistics. All that does increase to the product pricing when it comes into the country, and it has an impact on the consumer. But my ministry is focusing on the local content policy, and in order for us to produce locally and reduce the impact of pricing on the consumer, we have to take very seriously a private sector-led growth. I'm therefore very pleased to see that this platform that First Capital has created presents us with an opportunity to look at ourselves, for us as government, to also be willing to be interrogated, to also be willing to accept that at times our policies are not so consistent. And I want to take that on board. But what I'm seeking from the private sector and seeking from colleagues within Fast Capital is to please do not hesitate to come to us and say, Minister, here is a problem, and it's going to affect the manufacturing industry. And it's important for me as a minister and also my colleague ministers to be able to listen. And only that way can we move forward. Therefore, I'm asking you, Kieran, that I think it's time for another coffee because we haven't done that for a while.
Always happy to do that, Minister.
I therefore wish you all fruitful deliberations, and my ministry is ready, an open door policy to participate in this dialogue in order for us to take note of the key takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for those remarks, and certainly for extending, that assistance and that open door policy, that if you have a problem, please come and see us. I will certainly be calling to book an appointment for that coffee as well. So do expect that call coming your way very soon, Honorable Minister. At this point, allow me to now hand over to Kieran so he can speak to some of the issues that have been raised. I think in the minister's address, as well as Busisa, there are issues that I think speak to requirements of funding and opportunities therein. But over to you now, Kieran, to speak to some of those issues and what First Capital Bank is lining up for players in the sector.
Thank you, Farai. I think the first thing I guess I want to just talk about, and Busisa mentioned this, and the Honourable Minister has also, it's easy to get hooked up on the problems and the challenges, and everything is doom and gloom, but there is a lot of good stuff happening out there. And I often say to people overseas when they talk about the fact that it's a problem, might never go there today, and I say, well, you can't look at the macro, you've also got to look at the micro. What's happening on the ground can be very different to what you're hearing internationally, and there is a lot of positive things happening, as both Busisa and the Minister did allude to, but there clearly are equally an awful lot of challenges. But let me talk about from a First Capital perspective, and then maybe I'll come back and address some of the issues, or at least some of the issues and have been raised. But we clearly have a number of offerings across the bank that we do offer to industry. Busisa talked about asset financing, and that is something that we've started down the road of. The challenge, of course, with a number of these products, if it's asset financing, importing, it generally requires currency. So we can provide the currency, and we are providing the US dollar loans to businesses. But the challenge is that has to be to a business that's earning in currency so that they can actually repay the loan in currency. So that is a problem perhaps for somebody like Busisa, whose predominant income may well be in RTGS, but he needs dollars to import raw materials. He needs dollars to import equipment. So as a bank, for me to lend him dollars when he's earning in local currency creates a challenge, because I need to be repaid in currency. So that's where we go down slightly different routes, but we have to get better at creating solutions that can work for that. But in terms of our book, we have, on the face of it, manufacturing is about 20% of our loan book. However, if you look at the agricultural value chain and you include some of the agri areas, it's probably around 50% if you put those two together. And as I'm sure the viewers and certainly the Minister will be well aware, we have just signed an agreement with the European Investment Bank for a €12.5 million line of credit, which will focus on SMEs and mid-cap businesses. And I think that's hugely important, because it will allow long-term financing to fund those businesses. And that is obviously the area where, if we can get the right SMEs, mid-cap businesses, you are going to fund the growth as we go forward. We also have done a lot of work through the COVID crisis in tourism. We've supported a number of tourism businesses as they've gone through that, with discounted loans, interest payment holidays, loan rollovers, etc. But we also support manufacturing, transportation, and agriculture is a big area we've gone into more recently. And we have a good relationship manager structure where people have expertise in various industries. And we'll continue to evolve the service offering as we look at what's happening. And we are trying to also, as I mentioned earlier, build our partnerships so we can start to really understand the business problems and try and work with business to actually build solutions for the business, but it's also got to work for the business, it's got to work for the bank, it's got to work for the country. I think these are all incredibly important areas. And we're trying to get more innovative about how we actually fund businesses. So I'll give you an example, you know, to the unbanking, the people who haven't got knowledge about banking, maybe I always equate banking in its simplest form to a bit like running a shop. Your liabilities, your deposits, the money that comes into the bank is the stock that goes in the shelf. That's what you take and you lend onto a business. If we haven't got sufficient liabilities flowing through the bank, it hampers our ability to fund businesses. And that's not a good position to be in. So we are looking at increasing ways of how we can actually push forward, raise our liabilities a lot further, higher, so that we can also lend onto businesses. And clearly there's a win there for us. There's a win there for businesses such as the insurance, the pensions industry, that may be sitting on cash piles that they need to utilize. So we can give them a return, we can earn a return, and we can also fund businesses. So that kind of advisory services, financial solutions, and strategic partnerships are critical in my mind to banking as we go forward. It shouldn't be a short-term relationship with the business. It should be built on trust, partnership, so that we can work together going forward. So it's interesting, and just to turn to some of the challenges, and the minister talked about all the good work that's been done. I think the one thing that we need to also learn and work together is right across government in terms of policies. So an example was I went to see somebody who had closed down a manufacturing plant in Bulawayo about a year ago. They had, I think, talked to various government ministries, and they said this product was imported. If you can invest in that, manufacture that, it's good import substitution. So they went and they did that, but as they started to build it, they realized the costings weren't working. And what was happening was the duty on the imports that he needed was being applied. But when they imported the finished product, there was no duty. So consequently, manufacturing in Zimbabwe became more expensive and the import was cheaper because we weren't charging duty on the import, we were charging duty on the raw materials. So it's just thinking about that right end-to-end process from a government perspective, from finance through agriculture, etc. And we also need to try and help businesses in bringing in services that they need. So we all know FX is a challenge for us. It's a challenge across the country. But you know, we have worked with, as most of you will know, with my Irish heritage. I've worked closely with the Irish ambassador in South Africa, who have developed a long-term strategy around their agriculture business, and over 20 years they've built a very successful strategy, and they're keen to work with Africa and keen to develop and help. And I talked to one business in Ireland who's keen to get involved in Zimbabwe, and we're trying to facilitate that. But the challenge he's had is he's a biotonix. He looks at analyzes soil, analyzes primarily sweet potatoes, and he's increased yields in Ghana, for example, from 20 per hectare to 60 per hectare. So he's tripled the yield. And we're trying to bring him in to do some business here, but we're running into roadblocks in trying to navigate exchange control requirements, so we can bring him in and start to develop a strategy and prove that this can work. So there are things like this that we need to work on just to ease business and to try and make sure we really do demonstrate Zimbabwe is open for business, and we're making business transaction and business process and business bureaucracy easy for people to navigate. I think, let me finish there. I think it's great. Bozisa talked about capacity utilization, the raw material and machinery, and I love the thinking around how we actually bring value. The lithium batteries is a great example. So I think these are areas that, you know, as banks, as financiers, as industry, and as government, we need to be all working together to think about how we develop that. So let me finish off there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kieran, for that. I think very informative. And once again, thank you to everyone who is joining us and tuning into our different platforms and sending contributions and questions. We'll be getting to those very shortly, so do keep them coming. I would love to hear from you, would love to hear what you have to say, and encourage more people to join in and be part of the discussion. And I want to bring in our other two panelists for some, their brief comments and responses to what we've heard, and also to be brief so that we can get to so many questions and contributions that are coming through and make it as interactive as possible. As I mentioned, we have a very accomplished entrepreneur in our midst. She, started her own business and has grown it into a formidable player in the packaging industry. Let's now hand over to Ms. Kudzai Dave. She will give us her insights and experiences in regards to what's happening, where the opportunities are, and how she is managing and navigating the environment. Over to you, Kudzai.
Thank you, Farai. Let me just start by thanking First Capital Bank for availing this opportunity. To appreciate as well the corporate division, my fellow panelists, and our very own Minister of Industry and Commerce, Dr. Seka Nzenza. We appreciate so much and value your presence. Let me say, just repeat a bit what we are discussing here, that it is the challenges, opportunities, and trade optimization for industry and commerce. Thank you so much, Mr. Busisa, for diving deep into the challenges and opportunities. I want to start with challenges. The reason why I want to start with challenges, it's something that rolls my nerves, the challenges. Opportunities, yeah, we ride on them, but what we face day to day, on behalf of KDB and other manufacturers whom I might be knowing or not knowing, thumbs up to Madam Sekai, CZI, appreciate you so much. There is uncertainty in our economy. Regardless of how we may strive to push, to move, they say history repeats itself. Unfortunately, I'm not able to share my screen, but I will share everything with the team behind the scenes at First Capital, and they will share it, share it on the LinkedIn. They say history repeats itself. For me, the challenges that we face, it's like we're back in 2008, when we think we are moving into 2022. Why I'm saying that? It's part of the barriers that we are facing. It's like the regulatory environment, the hostile regulatory environment continues to be a challenge. Minister once talked about it as well, inconsistency in our policies. We always share about it in the various meetings that we do, but now what remains is for us to implement that which we discuss, because you find that these barriers, we continue to talk about them, but with no change. The regulatory environment as well, it's a challenge. Policy inconsistency, foreign exchange controls. With that one, let me just divert a bit. This is really a challenge for us because we don't even have funds to buy raw materials due to escalating foreign exchange controls. I want to enter into the RBZ concerning the auction that we do every week. If I can say yes, I've been awarded Businesswoman of the Year, but I have not even received sorry for that, received any funding from the auction. Reasons, maybe we don't qualify. Reasons will be red flagged. And we all know the challenges of COVID, that COVID affected us from different angles. And for instance, let me just give you my story. And I thank you so much for this opportunity. We bought a machinery in India. And for the past 1-2 years, there's been a challenge of a battle between China and India concerning containers. And this went on for a very long time. And we were caught in between that challenge of containers. And the machinery that we bought could not be sent to Zim up to now as we speak. So you can imagine 2 years of suffering waiting for a machinery that you bought to increase your production. And then when you go to the RBZ, you are red flagged because you have not remitted, and which is something which will be beyond your control. It's a challenge that we face, that at times you can share your grievances on the foreign exchange controls, or maybe through the barriers in the banks, and you are not heard. So I thank you so much for this opportunity that I may be able to share, though it might not be consistent, but it's also a barrier of not being heard. And it's not always that when one is red flagged, they have not used the funds properly. It will be challenges, say like this of containers, which will be beyond one's control. So I'm also asking for the voice of someone who is writing in plea to be heard, and also for our banks to go deeper and to know your clients more than just to see paperwork and keep quiet after reading someone's challenge. And also I want to zero in on another challenge, which is prioritization of loans to personal versus business. When we apply for loans through the banks, be it soft loan or anything, you find that our banks, they prioritize individuals as compared to business. And the other challenge, the other barrier that I see is a shortage of infrastructure. That's land, buildings, machinery, and equipment. I want to focus on barriers as far as KDEV is concerned. Where we are right here, we are renting. Yes, I was awarded Businesswoman of the Year, but to me, it will not make sense to be a Businesswoman of the Year who doesn't own a property where they operate their business from. I rent this property where I am, and if you are to approach those responsible, I understand this goes to my lovely minister, Dr. Sekai Nzenza, that even if we approach asking for state land to put our factories, you find that there will be nothing like that. And another barrier that I see is we focus so much on giving land to, yes, land barons are there, to those who do residential stands versus commercial. And that's really something which is a challenge for that I see. We might be differing. I might be shooting myself, it's okay. We might be differing on what we believe in, but I believe, as Busisa said earlier on, we should thrive on expecting to drive industry than residential. So if we can grow our industry, then it means we can even buy more expensive houses after driving our industry. That's as far as barriers are concerned. And also more land, that is to my minister, Comrade Sekai Nzenza, that we need land. I loved what you said, Dr. Nzenza, that our take home will be value addition. So in completing this value addition, KDEV will be appealing for land to put plantations. We used to have plantations in the Manicaland area where timber was being grown and paper was being done with one of our competitors, but not competitors, such Winyani. We complement each other to grow our nation. But you find that people were now given that land and they settled and they destroyed all the plantations and settled on the plantations. It's now a residential, they are now residential stands on a plantation, which is supposed to be feeding in the value chain of the paper industry. If you can look into that, Comrade Minister, and remember, KDEV, that we require land for plantations to add into the value chain so that if we own those plantations, we can do our own conversion of the paper, of the pulp into paper and then into our own production. If that can be put into consideration, it will be a plus, meaning to say we will import less of the raw material. Because, for instance, right now, we are almost 6 in this domain of packaging. And the 6 of us, we all take from Mondi one source, NAMPEC, one source in SA. And imagine the foreign currency that we give to SA. Instead of, and we've got land, enough land to have our own plantations and give this and make this a better value chain. And also, if we get that land, we can have what you call them, solar farms. For instance, if we don't have ZESA here at KDEV, we move to the generator, thereby polluting the environment. But if we are able to be given enough land to make our own solar farms, then it means we've got a better environment to work from. And also, I want to zero in again on the finance.
Sorry, Kudzai, if I could just ask you to quickly wrap up, because the minister will need to leave us very shortly, so we want to be able to get her to get a few questions. But if you could wrap up now, so we could hand over to the minister, and also to speak directly to some of the requests that you've just made here.
All right, it's all right. So maybe let me just jump off and go to the opportunities, because on the opportunities, I believe that our land Zimbabwe is a very conducive place to do business from. It is peaceful. Besides being peaceful, we also ought to benefit from the Africa Free Trade Zone, where we are to link the African nations and do business, and also to build the relationship for engagement with private sector and regulatory matters, so as to combat inflation and increase production. I believe that as our mantra says, that we are open for business. It is quite an opportunity. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kudzai, for that very passionate and impassioned presentation. I think, it's always great to have people who are in the trenches, who are living this and experiencing it, to share what they are going through and what the requirements are. So we value that certainly quite a lot. And thank you so much for that contribution. I want to now very quickly move on to our final panelist. As was mentioned, he has worked in the financial sector in the region for many years, and is now at the Masawara Group. He's the head of investments there. Watson Hamunakwadi, over to you, sir, for your presentation.
Thank you, Farai, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister for participating, as well as to Kieran and the team for putting together this discussion, and to my co-panelist. I'll be brief. I know the Minister certainly would like to hear from her. I think it's important for us collectively to understand that we're not competing with ourselves. We're competing on an international scale. So the manner in which we manage industry, the manner in which we manage our production, the manner in which we are positioned in global value chains actually matters. And what that means is we have to start from a conversation that says, how integrated are you in the international and global value chain for any product? And in that placing, are you the best at that point? Is it a profitable point that you're in? And does it make sense for investors? Does it make sense for employees? Does it make sense for country? And that's what ultimately drives interest and appetite to fund, to see investors come through, and to get a very focused mechanism of working with different stakeholders to progress things. Secondly, the environment with which you are faced with and that you play in plays a critical role in being able to really drive you forward or kill you. If you're listening to what KW Packaging is saying, it's a very clear cry for, can we make the environment better to make that business go forward? I'll talk about the challenges from experience, particularly within our portfolio. As you know, Masara is very diversified. We're third in hospitality in this country. We're 3-4 in financial services, particularly in the insurance sector. We're the largest fertilizer manufacturer outside of South Africa, all the way to West Africa. So what are the challenges? Number one, we know our customers. So it's key to know your customers, but also importantly, how those customers pay. Kieran is right in saying, if your customers can't pay you in the currency that you can fund, you're not bankable, right? So we always need to know that right from the beginning, the way in which our customers are able to access foreign exchange markets, are able to access foreign customers in order to bank their product, it's an important part of the value chain that allows us to access funding. So from our perspective, one of the key things is to create an enabling environment for customers to participate in this market in a way that allows producers to have and to hold the foreign currency required to be able to be globally competitive. And what that means is a combination of either A, consistent access to foreign exchange, or B, actually having that foreign exchange in a way that you can use it for your financing activities. Efficiency is key. One of the biggest challenges that we've had and that we see has been an investment into maintenance and expansionary capex. It's a very, very shallow space. And I say that because, whilst we have many banks, and I think First Capital Bank has done a significant amount of investing, particularly into the Masara Group. A case in point is when we're starting a new healthcare business, and they were able to provide significant funding into that. And I can tell you locally, it was very challenging to raise that kind of money from financial institutions. But what was the thinking there? The importance of that is the amount of liabilities that banks have is a driver of commerce in a country. So whilst, as Busisa says, he prays that he sees one day that we're not exporting 95% of cotton. But I can tell you, as an example, with our fertilizer business, the amount of working capital requirement, albeit on a revolving basis, is north of $80 million. And when the price of ammonia goes up, because it's an important raw material, that price easily goes to $150 million in a year. So if you now look at the local institutions and say, how can you fund that? It's not fundable. In simplicity, it really isn't fundable. Whether it's on a syndicated basis or not, it's very difficult to have a single line of that magnitude, even if it's syndicated by the local banks, which means that our liabilities franchises are not able to carry the significant scale of working capital that is required by large industries. So how do we move from there to being competitive? In the region, you'll see many different models that have been adopted and have been banked. It starts with having completely a liberal system from the point of when a customer originates a transaction or completes production all the way to the sale of that product, that entire chain mustn't be touched. It mustn't be slow. It mustn't be subject to bureaucracy. And what that means is, and I'll give an example here, because I think it's good to work with examples. The Kenya Tea Development Agency, and that's a business that I once banked specifically in structured trade and commodity finance. They're the largest tea exporter, one of the largest tea exporters in the world. I think number 3. They have, let's call it 600,000 customers that they have that trade on their platform. Banks can track a bag of tea that is produced by a raw farmer all the way until it's sold within a specified period of time. That means that the structured trade finance that you can do there is articulate, but there's no point where their forex is held up. There's no point where after the auction has happened, there's any delay. There's just zero bureaucracy in that entire process. And what that means is it allows the fundability of all of this. So we need to have a system, and we need to make sure that the manner in which we conduct business is free of bureaucracy. So I think that's an important thing that makes us move forward. In terms of investing in working capital and in maintenance CapEx and in expansion CapEx, we have to recognize that some of the efforts that First Capital Bank and other banks are having to open up international lines of credit is important. But Kieran will tell you it's a drop in the ocean, right? You start with the 12.5 million line. That, I mean, I'm sorry to say, it's not going to move the needle, right? It's not going to move the needle if we're trying to industrialize. Industrialization programs don't take $10, $20 million. They take hundreds of millions to billions of dollars. But what drives that? What drives appetite for funding? What drives appetite for investing? There's very few places that I haven't sort of been exposed, and I can tell you, investors want a return. They want an assurance that that return will come through. They want to make sure that the environment, that the businesses that they're in and that they're invested, despite any policy or any regulation, that there's just zero bureaucracy and there's a certainty of movement of their capital in and out. And they want government support in that space, not for government to solve problems, but for government to create the enabling environment. I think what the Honorable Minister is saying is, let me help with that. And I think she's done a lot to move the needle, but it's important to really strengthen the entire system. It's not a single point of contribution that matters, but it's across the entire chain. So if I'm to close, I would say it's important to realize that we have an opportunity to identify the right spaces in the value chain where Zimbabwean businesses can participate. We need to make sure then that customers are able to pay in the currencies that make businesses actually work. And if they pay in any other currency, they're able to translate that, even if it's in Zim dollars, are able to translate that into the currency that the business that they're paying can make work. We need to know that we have to be efficient in our industry, which requires continued investment in maintenance and expansion CapEx, which is predicated on how those customers are paid. I'm not going to rock up to Kieran and say, Kieran, can I have $50 million? But don't worry, I'm not sure what the flow of funds is. There's nothing like that. It'll never work with Kieran. It'll also never work with international banks. So it's so important to make sure that we understand that this is a concerted effort that everyone needs to be playing on the same field, because sometimes I get the sense that we're trying to win the World Cup, but we're not mending the field where we're practicing. So we've got to make sure that the various areas that that you'd have heard Kudzai speak about, Busisa speak about, Kieran speak about, are sorted. And I want to make sure, in my space, I would say, when we have those conversations, it's absolutely crucial that we're forging a way that's not celebrating of little gains. I'd like to really see substantial gains in a way that's unifying everybody to make sense. Because I can tell you, if I just speak about Sable alone, as a company that can provide the fertilizer required in this country, we missed a good opportunity at the beginning of the year, where had we produced fertilizer when the ammonia gas price was sitting at 800, 900 a ton, we would have had much cheaper fertilizer this year in our country than producing now when it's now sitting at 1,800. That's double. So funding coordinated approaches to working together is really what moves us forward. I'll stop there, and I think most of anything that I could have said has been well articulated by most of the panelists, and let's open it up to hear what questions come from the floor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Watson, for that. And indeed, thank you to all the panelists who are at this point have had their say. The Honorable Minister has had to leave us because of some pressing urgent business, but we do have a director from the ministry who is still joining us and who is part of this and will be able to speak to some of the issues that are being raised, and we'll be speaking to them very shortly. But I thought let's give this time to some of the questions and contributions that have been coming through via our LinkedIn platform. John Chinyuku, he is the founder and CEO of Unisub Corporation. He says, "Thank you, Kudzai Dawe, for the passionate presentation. You are right. We need to have more implementation than just discussions." We also have here this is Lambert Fadzai Gwenure saying, honest presentation there, Mrs. Dawe. So clearly, the insights that you raised resonating with many people out there who seem to share the same sentiments. More contributions here coming through. Let me take a few more of them and then allow our panelists to respond to them. Let me begin with these ones directed, I think perhaps Musisa would be able to speak to these directly. Epifania Kwedza, in trade, they work in trade finance and swift payments. She says, would it not be better to support local soybean farmers to increase supply than to import crude soya oil? If we grow our own, we also get byproducts for cattle feed, etc. Also, sunflower farming could be encouraged so that we have enough. Marco Master asked a question that is directed to the ministry, and I will give that to them, but let me just read it for now. Marco Master is saying, to what extent is the government assisting in recapitalization of manufacturing industry for cost optimization and competitive pricing of products? Thank you so much. Tafadzwa Nyamande says, is Zimbabwe self-reliant in terms of cooking oil? So at this point, there are a lot more questions, but because I want to direct them and make sure that they're going to the right people, Musisa, if you could very quickly perhaps speak to these two questions. Is Zimbabwe self-reliant in terms of cooking oil, and the issue about supporting local soya farmers, as well as perhaps looking at sunflower farming?
Okay, thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies, and thank you to my fellow panelists for covering broader aspects and different viewpoints from the manufacturing sector. As to the questions on the edible oil, the journey has already begun. As United Refineries, we are contracting farmers. I've already been having conversations with First Capital Bank to identify a group of farmers that they can support. So we've already begun this localization of the value chain, but it's a long journey. Just for our company alone, we are going to have to grow 30,000 hectares if we are to be totally self-sufficient. 30,000 hectares. Last year we did 2,500 hectares contracted. Of course, Watson, we need to be talking about Watson, where are we going to get our compound fertilizer? And, in a global supply shortage, the issues that he raises, if farmers cannot replace the fertilizer that they used last year, that's a problem. So there are issues, but the journey has already begun. And we've already started working with the Agricultural Marketing Authority. We have an association called the Food Crop Contractors Association, which everybody should know about. So we're not the only ones that are contracting farmers. There's a whole bunch of us there, maybe 30, 40 companies in Zimbabwe, from the PHIs of this world to the Staywells. We are a new entrant into the sector as United Refineries, but one of the only integrated players. So we are contracting to bring straight into our factory, not to trade the commodity. So we're slightly different in that regard. But as Watson says, this is 30,000 hectares. To grow soya beans on 30,000 hectares at $1,500 per hectare, you are going to need $45 million, just one shot. And that's in addition to our normal business, which has its own requirements. So if we are going to transform and have the new companies like your Tongaat or your Deltas that, in the prior to independence, started integrating their supply chains, having farmers in the Lowveld grow sugarcane. So it's not rocket science. This has been done before. But as Watson pointed out, this needs significant amounts of capital to localize farming value chains. We've got issues like land title. So farmers don't have title to their land at the moment. And there are these agreements that farmers, will sign with people that have 99-year leases. I mean, I know there's the debate of, do you need to own the land to grow it? No, you don't, if the banks will finance somebody who doesn't own it. So the banks have answered the question for us. If you don't have title, you are not going to get finance. Certainly, if you're sitting on a lease, it's going to be very difficult. But, talking to the likes of First Capital Bank, you see how we get creative, guarantee the crop insurance treaties. You also mentioned sunflower. People, there's no argument between soya or sunflower. Zim at the moment is a soya market for various reasons. Soya oil is more affordable than sunflower oil globally. And there's a reason for that. It's because the stock feed, which is a recovery, is much more in demand. And so your cost of oil is much lower because the meal price is so high. So you can grow sunflowers, but your recovery, because sunflower meal is not that much in demand, you might struggle. So apportion colleagues from running to sunflower. There's a reason why even South Africa is going more and more towards soya and not sunflower because of those reasons. So that's what I'll say as a comment to self-sufficiency. It is a journey. It will probably take us 8 years with the right funding, with government support. One positive thing that I can say, I know we complain a lot about policy. One very positive thing is the SIs, SI 126, 127, that protect contractors. So if I'm a contractor now, I'm protected at law, and it's a criminal offense to side market. This is a big positive instrument that government introduced to support contractors like ourselves. And I must say it has worked wonders in us getting financial support, getting the likes of the bank to come on site because they know that we are protected at law. Before it was a jungle. You could contract farmers and they'd run off with the output. So this is a positive development, and we look forward to doing it more and more, getting more and more farmers, quality farmers, farmers of integrity on board and growing with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Busisa, for that. More contributions. Tembilihle Nobuhle Musipa agreeing with Kudzai, they're saying it's not only plantations that we need, even wetlands and tourism resorts should be left in their natural state instead of opening them up for other commercial and residential activities. They are cash cows in their current states. Tendai Neta says SMEs struggle to find support from various commerce departments in the land. We need to start scouting for businesses doing well and give them the support that they need. Banks aren't doing enough to support these potential entrepreneurs. Ministry of Industry and Entrepreneurs, Ministry of Industry and Commerce, you need to involve and support SMEs more. Another contribution here saying we are in a digital technology world, e-commerce to be precise. We struggle to survive, yet banks won't offer loans for such lucrative businesses such as ours. There's a lot of work to be done in our financial services sector. I want to quickly bring in Kudzai here to just speak to some of these issues. Are these frustrations that you encounter that, or are things changing that SMEs are now being recognized and support is being provided, or do you still feel that you are not getting that support? Certainly the one area that I know is in terms of the foreign currency auction. The impression I was given, or certainly when I speak to people, SMEs seem to be getting their funds a lot quicker than big corporates. So just speak to us very briefly in terms of the support that you're getting from the financial services sector.
What I can say is KDEVI as it stands, yes, there are various funds which are given, and under the mantra of Zim is open for business, and that women empowerment, I only hear of women being empowered, and that those who are in the manufacturing sector are being assisted. I only hear about that. Those responsible, if listening, they can check their records. There is nowhere KDEVI agencies trading as KDEVI packaging was listed as a beneficiary. I hear it as news. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very candid and direct response. Thank you so much for that. I want to bring in, Watson here. I want to talk about the Africa Consolidated Free Trade Area. Just bring you in and hear your insights in terms of that. Again, we're told huge opportunities. Usisa has spoken to some of them, and the minister also spoke to some of them. The reality, the practicality, given the constraints we've mentioned here of currency issues, funding issues, is Zimbabwe ready to capitalize on that? Or could it be, open, floodgates opened, and we end up, being overwhelmed by imported goods that have easy access?
Thanks for that. I think, I'll speak a little bit about my issue. I spent some time working with institutions such as NEPAD and the African Union, particularly with policies like this. They take time to put in place. They take time to get a good flow to work well. I think it presents a good opportunity from a region perspective, where you're getting a good advantage, and specifically where regional coordination, movement of goods is much better. That's always an advantage, because it helps with knowing that a manufacturing base in one country can benefit from a much larger market with better ease. The issue, I think, is there's always other countries that are more prepared than others. And it really comes down to what's the strength of your local system, what's the strength of your capital markets, what's the strength of your industrialist, and can you be competitive when that opportunity presents itself? Does it make it easier for goods to flow into your country? Absolutely. Will it make things cheaper? Yes. But does it ultimately benefit you? And it comes back to what point in the value chain are you? So we need to know, and I think it comes back to my point around, where are we placed in a global value chain and in a regional value chain? And are we prepared to make those investments and make the enabling environment really strong enough that we can gain an advantage? It's no use having an open season without you knowing where your capacity lies, because other countries where you now have, if I say I'm very comfortable with ammonium nitrate fertilizer, we're 240,000 tons. That's a big capacity. But we need to be talking that way in many other industries. If you ask KDEVI and to say, if to compare it with NAMPAC production capacity, packaging, bottling, canning, do we want a free season? Of course, for as long as KDEVI can get significant amount of funds, land, to be able to produce competitively at that rate, absolutely. What advantages do we have? We're great with our education, not so good with skills. And we're not so good with skills because whilst we're educated, the issue is we don't have the exposure. We need people who have seen large plants, worked on them, to be able to localize the capacity that can make us competitive in an AFTA situation. So I think, Farai, It's about capital. It's about people and skills. It's about the readiness to participate in a sort of coordinated and regionalized trade area by knowing your value chain positioning and investing in it today and creating the environment that allows us to be able to be the strong contender in every product, every position in the value chain, and then we're fine. But if that's not the case, I'm afraid it might have more benefits for others than for ourselves. So I don't think we're ready. I think we need to do a lot more before we are. We'll be ready when I know Kieran has liabilities of $1 billion.
Wow, that's huge expectations being put there, and I'm sure certainly First Capital Bank is capable, and this is well within its means. We'll let Kieran speak at the very end to wrap up and address many of the issues that have been raised here. As I mentioned,
sorry, just one thing. I say this to Kieran because Kieran's been a big supporter of initiatives that Kieran and the head of banking, Mutema, have been very, very supportive of initiatives. Honestly, that when I try to do them within the market were very difficult to do because of just this. What are you banking? You've got to understand what you're banking is the first thing. And I think First Cap has done a phenomenal job at opportunities that we've thrown at them, and they've done very well at supporting that. So that's been very good. That's why I keep wanting more liabilities to go there.
Great. Thank you so much, Watson. As I mentioned earlier, the Honourable Minister had to leave us, but she did leave us in the very capable hands of Mr. Dayford Nema, Director of Industry in the Ministry. And I'd just love him to come on board and address some of the issues that have been coming through. If I could just ask you, Mr. Nema, to just switch on your camera so we can get a good look at you as you respond to some of these issues that have come through. There were questions that were raised earlier around, what the ministry or what government is doing to support, in this assisting in the recapitalization of the manufacturing industry, so that it can be, more competitive from a pricing perspective. So issues around, support is being availed to businesses so they can, lower their costs. I know Kieran gave an example of a business in Ulaya, I think, where, imports or the components of producing the raw materials required to produce a certain good had import duties on them, whereas the finished product didn't have duties. So it was cheaper to manufacture elsewhere and then just bring in, the finished product. So those sort of issues are things we often hear about. What is the ministry doing to try and make sure that local industries, local manufacturers become more competitive?
Thank you, Chair. And a very good morning to you all. I'm quite excited to be with you here. And let me, first of all, thank you, Chair, for organizing such a platform that will be made use by the stakeholders so that we push the economy forward in order for us to realize the Vision 2030, where our economy is going to be an upper middle income society by then. Thank you so much. Right, as a ministry, you are aware that the ministry is a facilitator of industrialization, and our discussion is right on track, where we are discussing issues to do with industrialization, production. Number one, as a ministry, we are, as you are aware, we've got the parastatal IDC. The IDC has got a DFI, operating as a DFI. It has got funds to it to the tune of 2.3 billion Zim dollars that were introduced by the Minister of Finance in the 2022 national budget. Besides that, ladies and gentlemen, we have also the SDR, where part of the SDR has been dedicated for industrialization through the cotton to clothing, the value chain, the leather, the pharmaceutical, the fertilizer, and all the rural industrialization projects. And in this, that's where issues to do with SMEs are also roped in. Because when we are looking at rural industrialization, we are looking at also issues to do with empowerment of SMEs when they are inputting their raw materials to the big companies. So in other words, the linkages that will necessitate rural industrialization. We also have the mineral beneficiation in terms of glass manufacturing. So all in all, we have got the SDR to the tune of 30 million US. Right. In terms of rebate of raw materials to the pharmaceutical sector, I think this has been noted, and what we will require is a write-up so that, remember, I have just said we are a facilitator. We then work together. There is strength in numbers. Where there is a problem and 2, 3, we come together, I think we will surmount the problem. So if we can have a write-up to that issue, and then we can facilitate that through the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. Thank you, Chair. I submit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much there to Mr. Dayford Nema. He's the Director for Industry in the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. Again, reiterating what the Honourable Minister said earlier, if you have any issues, if you have any challenges, bring them to our doorstep and we'll have them addressed. So we certainly look forward to some of the issues that have been raised here being brought forward to you, being put down in writing, and you know, again, for you to help and assist in terms of that. In closing, if I could just very quickly, you know, I want to give the last word because we've had a panel, Honourable Minister spoke, but because, you know, I had to cut her short earlier because before she had finished, I would like, and because she's the only lady left on the panel now, I'd like to give the final word to Kudzai David to, you know, in closing, after all we've heard today, any final message and parting shots that you might have before we conclude today's proceedings, just in terms of what you'd like to see done, what you think the priorities are, and the way forward.
Thank you, Farai. As you know, as you have heard, and now you understand that we are in the trenches. So when you are in the trenches, it's different from just reading a book which is theoretical. We at KDAV, we are hands-on. We believe in being practical in everything that we do. What I want to say is it's like repeating myself, to appreciate the First Capital team, and that I'm sure we should cease to just talk, but do that which we would have speak about. Let's go into the trenches and implement. If we knock your doors, thank you to Comrade Minister in absentia. If we knock the doors, may we have responses to what we would have knocked the doors for, because it means doors would have been knocked, but so let's be doers. Let's be doers. Let's do. Let's not just be theoretical people or people who just write strategies, the strategy document, court records. No, we need to do. Let's implement. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And finally, now I want to hand the platform back to Kieran to, I think, wrap up what we've heard today. I think in the presentations that have come up, I think there were concerns certainly from, you know, viewers online talking about SMEs not getting enough support. Busisa spoke about some of the intricacies and challenges of lack of title, and you know how that creates problems for financing and all that. So in a nutshell, to sort of conclude what we've heard here, given the challenges, given what the opportunities are, you know, I suppose a commitment to how we get around this and way forward.
Sorry, just checking I was off mute. Thank you for that, and thank you indeed to everybody for their contributions, the Honourable Minister, the Director, our panelists, and indeed all the listeners. There's a couple of points just to kind of summarise, and I will come back to some of the specific points that were raised. I think I jotted down some themes that for me are important and what I think I heard coming through today. One is about policy consistency, and indeed Watson talked about, you know, what's needed from an investor's perspective. And we had a meeting with the Irish ambassador the other day because they're interested in what's happening here. And this is one of the themes that came up. It's about policy consistency and confidence in the government, confidence in policy, and that consistency. We also need to think about that end-to-end thinking that I referred to, you know, the right through government, through business, which all will lead to investor confidence. I'd also like to raise the subject of consultation on policy. Often policy comes out, and I feel that there's not enough consultation with business. Like Kudza said, people on the ground in the trenches, also banks, industry. We need more consultation to look at that. And I've seen it before where people have worked with the greatest of respect to my government colleagues in government all their life and not in business. I think you have to work in a business to really understand the challenges that are faced on a day-to-day basis when you're in the trenches. So that consultation to me is really critical. And, you know, from a First Capital Bank perspective, you know, Brisa touched on this at the start. We will review and we'll look at our product set. We'll look and talk to our customers. If they've got particular problems, I encourage you to come and talk, because talking will always help us tease out issues and work out what we can do. As regards the SMEs specifically, we have created an SME team in First Capital this year who are focused purely on SMEs, trying to help and support SMEs. But what I will make the point to all our listeners, because I think it's very important, when banks lend money, it's not their own money that they're lending. It's usually depositors' money. So we have to be very careful in how we lend that money to ensure that there is some security and the credit is worthy of credit, and we're going to get that money back. Because at the end of the day, if it's, I'll use Basis as an example. If I take Basis's money and I lend it to Watson and Watson doesn't repay it, Basis is going to come back and look to me for his money. And if I say I haven't got it, I gave it to Watson, that's a problem. So it's as simple as that. We have to make sure that we have a robust credit process and we've got security. We try and ease that as much as possible, but for an SME and you starting business, that can often be more of a challenge. But that's why we've created that team to look at that. So I encourage people to really come and talk to us. But I think we do also need the government to help us also on mid-caps and SMEs and how we support them. Improve the ease of doing business. We've talked about that, to reduce the bureaucracy and try and help smooth the process. And I think also in terms of SMEs, if there's a potential guarantee that could come from government or some kind of support on lending, that would ease banks lending. But what I will do is I'm going to take up the Honourable Minister's invite for coffee and I will go and see her. And if we can gather all the issues that were raised here, we can perhaps sit down and have a good conversation around all of that. So let me finally wrap up by thanking everybody for their time, because I know time is valuable. The Minister and the Director in our absence, thank you so much for your time and making yourselves available for this. Kudza, thank you for your passion and really putting on the table the challenges that businesses are facing. Watson, also thank you for your time, and trust me, I didn't pay Watson for his complimentary comments on First Capital, but thank you for your kind words. Basisa, I apologize, I didn't mention our previous working together, but it's always a pleasure, and thank you for your time. I know it's valuable. So thank you to everybody. I think it's been a really useful webinar, and I look forward to doing many more of these because I do think they really bring value. So that's it from me. Thank you for all.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone who was on the panel. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us, who contributed, and many more who watched and just took something away from this. We certainly hope you got value. As Kieran said, many more. We hope for many more. We've done a whole lot before. So if you're only joining us now, we've done a whole series, and we look forward to doing a whole lot more. All this is brought to you, of course, by First Capital Bank, and is part of helping to assist in terms of creating opportunities, enabling business, and getting the economy in this country moving forward. That does it for this webinar. Look forward to seeing you again in future, and the discussion can keep going. So that comment section in our on the various platforms, you can still keep engaging, and the bank will continue to speak to you and to answer those questions and direct you in the right areas, in the right places. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, and do take care and be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.